All right, let's get started with some salad rolls with peanut sauce. So these salad rolls have the rice paper outside, and then they're gonna have rice noodles on the inside, vegetables, and then we'll do a nice peanut sauce on the side. So this recipe again is in two sections where I'm gonna focus on getting my peanut sauce done first, set that aside, and then I'll start working on all the good stuff that's gonna go inside of my salad roll, all my vegetables and my noodles and those types of things. So again, always mise en place. I got a lot of things set out here, equipment, ingredients. So then now I can just dive right in and get ready with my peanut sauce. So pretty simple with the peanut sauce. We're just gonna gather all of our ingredients together in a bowl and mix it. The only thing we need to do with our knife is do a minced garlic clove. So what we need for our peanut sauce is a 1/4 cup creamy peanut butter, a 1/4 cup creamy peanut butter, a 1/3 cup coconut milk, 2 teaspoons soy sauce, 1 each garlic clove minced, 1 teaspoon of fish sauce, 2 teaspoons of brown sugar, and juice from half a lime. And then with our instructions, we're just gonna mix in a mixing bowl. Start with the peanut butter and the coconut milk and whisk together. Mix till smooth, so your blank there is smooth. Add all other ingredients, mix well, taste and adjust seasoning if needed. If you want some more of a saucy consistency, you can add a little bit of water or maybe some more coconut milk. But this ratio tends to work out pretty well for a nice dipping sauce for some salad rolls. Okay, so a 1/4 cup of creamy peanut butter. The bottom of my jar starting to separate a little bit. Mix that back up. So with your 1/4 cup peanut butter, make sure you're using your dry measuring cup. I know lots of times it's a big question I get. What measuring cup am I supposed to measure peanut butter in? Is it wet? Is it dry? It is a dry because it can't level itself. So if I were looking to try to get a 1/4 cup in something like this, that'd probably be really difficult. It can't self-level, so I will pack that in there and level it myself. And then do my best to scrape everything out of there. Coconut milk. So making sure that you are grabbing a coconut milk. I know coconut water is kind of all the craze right now, so making sure you are getting a coconut milk. Before I open the can, I always like to shake it, especially it's been sitting a while. It tends to get some sediment that actually quite rises to the top, so the top will be nice and thick, while the bottom, and even down to the very, very bottom, looks like that coconut water where it's almost clear looking, really liquidy. So if it's just sitting on the shelf, it does kind of do a little bit of a separating, so where it's really thick on top and then really thin on the bottom. So give it a quick shake before you crack that open. And only a 1/3 cup of the coconut milk is what we need. So this one we're using our liquid measuring cup. And then it should pour right out. If you're noticing that you do have a thick top there, you can always just get a spoon or a spatula in there and just kind of stir things around so it can pour. Because if you have that thicker part that's settled here, it tends to just like avalanche out of the cup or out of the can into your bowl, and it's not fun. So make sure it is kind of a pourable consistency before you get going there. Two teaspoons of soy sauce. And then I'll jump down to my fish sauce, so 1 teaspoon of the fish sauce. So remember, our fish sauce kind of gives us that umami, has lots of great flavor when added to other things. So if it scares you in the bottle, try to be brave and add it to other things, and it's quite tasty. And then my 2 teaspoons of brown sugar. I'll get my knife work here in a little bit. Just get all my measuring done. So 2 just little teaspoons here. Making sure you're leveling them off. All right, let's go for our lime. All right, let's get this kind of mixed together a little bit. I've also seen this done if you were doing maybe like a double batch, a little bit more volume. You could do it in a blender or a food processor. If you feel like you're having a hard time kind of getting the chunks of peanut butter out, you want it really smooth, just because that peanut butter is quite thick. It may take a while of whisking to get a really smooth consistency. So like I said, you could use a blender or a food processor. This is a really small amount, so you might want to double it. Because if your volume in a blender is really small, it's probably not going to work very well. All right, that's looking smooth. I still need to add my garlic, but I can just go ahead and fold that in with my spatula. So 1 clove of garlic, and it says minced. So I do want to focus on getting a really small mince on my garlic, because it's just going in my peanut sauce and not getting cooked. I'm not going to cook my garlic, I'm not going to cook my peanut sauce. So I just want to make sure that the garlic I have in there is going to be really small, so that someone doesn't bite into a chunk of the garlic, and then that's all they'll taste for a week is garlic. Can be really overpowering and then take away from what you've just made. All they taste is garlic. So how I do that, this little tiny garlic clove here, is my cutting board is to the edge of my counter, and then I'll bring my knife to the edge of the counter or the cutting board as well, and then I'm going to give it a good whack. But again, everything at the edge here, so I have full contact of this knife blade on the cutting board, and not like this, right? I'm competing with that handle, and then I have this space right here. It doesn't hit flat. So I want to hit nice and flat. And then I can do some chopping here. And then once I've chopped that, I'm going to go back to the side of my knife and then just press. So I'm kind of hanging onto the back of the knife, and I'm just going to grab a little bit, but like really press down into the board. And every time I go back, I'm kind of grabbing a little bit more and pulling, grabbing and pulling. And then now, you can't even really see it, but if I get in the back of my knife, and then now I have this garlic, I call it a garlic paste. But it's just a really fine garlic. So when it goes into something like this that's not going to be cooked, but I still want that garlic flavor, but I don't really want to be chomping on chunks of garlic, I've got a nice thin garlic paste in there. We'll do that a few more times. We do that with our Alfredo sauce as well. Get our garlic nice and thin. As always, taste and adjust seasoning. All right. So now I got some peanut sauce. And that's peanut sauce. So now we're ready to move on to our salad roll parts here. So now my peanut sauce is done, focusing on my salad rolls. So we're gonna use these rice paper, and I'll get into that when we start to rehydrate them. For my purposes of demoing, and the way this recipe was written for a classroom full of kids and about 6 people or so per kitchen. I'm gonna make 4 salad rolls. So every amount that I'm gonna give you, that's because I'm gonna make 4 salad rolls. You could increase, because we have prawns, you can increase the prawns. You can definitely double it. It's gonna be really easy because it's just the fillings, but I'm gonna make 4. I don't wanna make too much. I got nobody to share it with here. And then also not too little. So keep that in mind. I'm gonna make 4 rolls. You can easily make more if you're trying to feed more people. So my romaine leaves. I need romaine leaves. It says I want, for every 1 leaf of romaine, I'm going to get 2 salad rolls out of it. So I'm gonna take a look at this, just trim off the ends, and then I'm gonna cut it in half. So I just trimmed the ends off the top of here, just got really like kind of large. That one looks a little beat up too. So I cut it in half, like half. So what this is gonna do, this is one of the first things, it's gonna go down to the base of my salad roll so that when I make it, it's kind of create like purpose of a backbone and gonna give my salad roll a little bit of structure, because this thick rib here on my romaine is gonna help keep my salad roll from like kind of flopping around everywhere. So that leaf of romaine, so you're gonna have half a leaf per roll. So I'm making 4 rolls. I got 2 romaine leaves, but I need 4 halves here. I'm gonna give these a quick rinse. All right, so I need half of a cucumber, seeded, peeled, and julienned. So my half a cucumber, seeded, peeled, and julienned. Well, what the heck does all of that mean? Let's get half a cucumber. So I want to peel it first, so I'll just cut off the end and peel it. And the reason I want to peel it is because the outside, the skin here, can be a little tough to bite through. And I'm going to be putting all kinds of vegetables and things in my salad roll. And what I really hate is when I take a bite out of something and everything falls apart. And it's really hard to bite into. Taking off this darker flesh there. So if I remove the skin there, that's going to make this a little easier to bite into. My teeth can bite through it a lot easier without the skin, so it doesn't kind of fall apart. So then now seeded. What does that mean, seeded? I want to take the seeds out. So a couple different ways to take the seeds out. And I want to take the seeds out because once I start to julienne this, it's going to be easier to julienne this when they're seeded. The seeds can sometimes be bitter, and then the seeds are kind of just not as structurally sound as the outside like flesh of the cucumber. They get a little soft and floppy, where I really want things to kind of help hold the shape of a salad roll and things aren't just kind of flopping around. So one way to seed a cucumber, to remove the seeds, is to use something like an old school peeler, but this handle of this peeler kind of fits in this exact channel where I want to remove the seeds from. So I just run that through the center, and then now I got the seeds out of there. That was pretty easy. But if you don't have one of those old school peelers or something else that fits that, you can also use a spoon maybe. You can definitely cut it in half again. So now I have 1/4 of a cucumber. Pull it to the edge of my board, and then now I'll just remove the seeds there. And then now I just have the flesh, my cucumber left. The seeds part I just toss. Certainly eat them if you want to. But then now I want to julienne this. So I want to make this nice and thin. Like I said, I'm kind of putting all these vegetables in a salad roll. I want things to be easy to eat. You know, thinking about it, biting into a burrito or a salad roll if you've ever had one. And you want to be able to eat it easy, and like I said, not have it all fall apart on you in the first bite. It can be really frustrating. Then I have a carrot. So this recipe says half a carrot peeled and julienned. This carrot's kind of small. I don't know, I might start with half carrot, see what happens. I think I might just go a little bit more than half a carrot because I'm looking at the size of cucumber I have. So if I went half, I'd have really little stubby carrot pieces. And this is just, I mean, that's always a nice easy snack, or you could definitely just julienne that itself. But I think I'm just going to go the same size that I have my cucumber here, because it is kind of a smaller carrot, to make kind of my presentation and my building a little easier. So to get a julienne carrot, I want to create a flat spot, so I'm just going to shave off kind of one end there, and then now it has a flat spot to hang out, so I can certainly julienne that piece I just cut. And then now I'm going to cut these thin planks, I guess. I'm not sure what to ever call those, but thin slices here. And then now these guys, all these broad planks, are just going to go into julienne. So a nice thin carrot. You can stack them if you want to. If you stack them, they start to get a little slippery. So if you're not comfortable, don't stack them. Just cut them one plank at a time to get them down to julienne. Keeping in mind that same process of keeping things thin and easy to eat. I don't want to have this giant chunk of carrot, and again, have everything fall apart as I'm trying to eat it. Then now I need half of a red bell pepper julienne. To seed my peppers and to get started, I always just cut my pepper in half. I've seen lots of different ways of people trying to seed and save a pepper. So I just cut it in half, and then now I move to my paring knife, and then now I'm just going to use my paring knife, because oftentimes when we use a paring knife, we can hold it this way and kind of work with it here. So once I have my paring knife, I can just kind of carve in, and I want to get rid of the white part here. That's just kind of the membrane inside. It's not super tasty. It's also just kind of getting in the way. It's not also pretty like this white or this red pepper I have. Smack out any other seeds in there. But now I have all the seeds out of there, all kind of in just one swift motion. And then I also don't have a lot of pepper waste. Like the red pepper I'm throwing away, that's just that much right there. It's not a whole ton compared to other methods that I've seen of trying to seed a pepper. All right, so now I have my half a pepper all ready to go, and I'm just going to julienne it. Leave it the same length it is, and then just run my flat knife through and julienne. Depending on how sharp your knife is, it might be easier to julienne in this fashion where the skin side is down, because if the skin side is down, I have that board to work up against. My knife has that board to work against to push through the skin. Sometimes it is, depending if your knife is kind of dull, it can be kind of hard for your knife to work through that skin. So if you're feeling resistance on that, flip your pepper over and cut it from the other direction so that the skin side is down. And like I said, that knife can work like to press through that skin against the board. Okie doke. Let's move down to our cilantro, because we're working with some vegetables here. My cilantro, I'm gonna need like 2 to 3 leaves per salad roll I make. And this is just a pretty garnish that we're gonna put on the inside of my roll. You'll see when I build them. So it does not take a lot of cilantro. So if you're going to the store to buy specifically cilantro for this project, you're gonna have a lot of cilantro left over. So maybe have another task in mind for some cilantro, if that's the case. So about, like I said, 2 leaves per roll. you make. I definitely have more than enough here in my little cup. Okay, so all my vegetables are done. So let's focus on what else I skipped over here. Poached prawns and my rice noodles. So I have prawns that I purchased and they're raw, like they were frozen. So now I want to poach them. I want to get them cooked before I put them in my salad roll. Of course, you can certainly buy prawns that are already cooked, just from like the meat section in the grocery store, or frozen, like cooked and frozen. So if they're pink, you'll know that those are cooked. So if they're pink, you no need to cook them. This is a cold salad roll, so you could just thaw those easily in the refrigerator overnight or under cool running water, and you can use them as is. But because mine are raw, I'm going to need to cook them. So I want to poach them. So as we were talking about cooking methods with poaching, I want to submerge in some just barely simmering water, not a whole lot of simmering water. I'm just going to use water. You can certainly jazz up your water. You can add some lemon juice into it. I'm going to add some salt, but you could add like pickling spices. You could add different things to your water to make it a little bit more flavorful. So just a smaller pot, because I'm only going to just do 4 prawns here because it's going to be 1 prawn per salad roll. We're going to cut them in half, so you'll have 2 halves per salad roll. So I'm going to do 4. I have a really small pot here, so I'm just going to get a little bit of water in this. Get some heat here, add a little bit of salt. Because I just want this water to come up just barely to a boil. If it comes to a boil, I'm always going to reduce it down. And then I'm just going to cook them. Once they're in that simmering water, because I only have 4 of them, I don't have a whole ton, it's not really going to take very long at all. It's going to be pretty darn quick of a process to get those prawns cooked up. So I'm going to wait for this water to come up to that simmer that I want for poaching. So while my poaching water is coming up to a simmer, let's talk about prawns a little bit. Like I said, I bought these frozen, just in a bag. You can certainly buy them cooked. So like I said, if they're pink, you know that they're cooked. So these are definitely not pink. But talking about some sizes. This one says it's a large prawn, and we'll see. They're decent, they're pretty large. That's an okay size for prawns. But further looking at the sizes of prawns, and our prawns, all of our bags are going to have a number on them. So if you see here, yes, it says large, but it also says 3140 shrimp. Well, what does that mean? So every bag of shrimp that you see is going to have a number like that. It'll say large, just kind of for layman's terms for everybody at the grocery store, but this means something. All of them are going to have a range. Smalls are usually 2130s, mediums 1620s, large, we have extra large, extra large, all different ranges of them. But what the number means is how many of them you're going to expect per pound. So there's a little bit of a range here, but I can expect that when I buy these large prawns that there's going to be 31 to 40 of them per pound. So that can make it easy for me if I am trying to host a party or have some people over and I want to make sure everyone has approximately 4 prawns, or maybe I'm doing a recipe where I want X amount of prawns. Then I know how many prawns to order. So when we do large parties or buffets and we know we've got 200 people coming, we want to make sure everybody gets at least 4 prawns, do some math. How many pounds do we need so that we can order appropriately and we're not going crazy over or crazy under. But these numbers are going to associate to how many prawns you will expect per pound. So really handy. The other ones that you'll see, so you'll see things like 31s, 40s, 1620s, 21s, 25s, but then you're also going to see things that say U10s or U6 or U8s. And what that means is that those are really big and there are under 8 per pound or under 15 per pound. So that they're really big, you're going to see it's going to be 8 or under per pound. So if you have a whole pound of shrimp, this bag was 2 pounds when I bought it, but if you have a whole pound of shrimp, there'd be 8 of them per pound. That's a huge prawn. It's a really big shrimp. So like I said, they're all over the board, but when you see these numbers, that's what that means. They're just expecting how many per pound, but just a little insider tip. We use that all the time in the kitchens trying to get our ordering correct. So like I said, we're not spending too much money and buying too much, or we're not underbuying or cooking. Maybe we've got a whole bunch of prawns in the freezer, but we don't want to not cook enough or just cook too many. So it helps us with our numbers and our math, because in kitchens, we're always talking about numbers and math and trying to make the bottom line. So we're not just wasting money stupidly, in a sense, but we can be a little bit more purposeful for what we're prepping. All right, so my poaching liquid is boiling. I'm gonna get this kind of down, maybe more to a simmer. I don't need those kind of rough boils here. I can get it more to a simmer. And then I'll add my prawns, and they are not going to take very long at all. There's, like I said, only 4 of them. I'm not overcrowding my pan. If I was doing a lot, I'd want definitely a bigger pan. I'd want enough room for my prawns to swim around and have plenty of room. But prawns generally don't take a lot of time. Again, if I had a bigger pot and more prawns, I also want to consider that when I add all those prawns, it's going to drop the water temperature down quite a bit, because you're just adding a bunch of cold product to boiling water. So even now my simmer I had kind of chilled out for a little bit, and now it's going to come back. So once I see that they're pink, because they're starting to turn pink, but they're still kind of that gray color on the center there. So once they're pink, but then they're also really, really firm. You can guess, generalize, 4 minutes, but once you see like a good simmer, come back. So if you're putting doing a huge batch and you've got a bunch of prawns going in and your temperature is dropped and it's going to take a while for the temperature to come back, I would do 3 to 4 minutes once you see that simmer, the gentle simmer bubbles come back. So if not from the very beginning, again, if you're doing a bigger batch. So I've got my simmer bubbles coming back. I'll wait here 3 to 4 minutes. I'll get them out, and then I'll put them in an ice bath. So what I want to do is be able to cool them, and cool them quickly. And I'll be able to do that with an ice bath. All right, so my prawns have been simmering. They're definitely good and firm. So like I said, getting them out of that hot water and then getting them into an ice bath. So we've talked about blanching and shocking before. It's that same process. So the ice bath is going to be shocking. So it's going to be the process where I'm trying to cool my food down. So if you remember like deviled eggs and coloring one, that we have that ice bath. It's a good mixture of ice and water, not like water and 2 ice cubes, but a good mix of water and ice. And it's to stop the cooking process. So now I have something kind of delicate like prawns. I don't want to keep cooking them. So even if I take them out of that hot water, I put them on the plate or something, they're still going to continue to cook. So I want to stop the cooking process, and that's what the ice water is going to do. Stop the cooking process and then cool them down quickly, because I'm going to put them in my chilled salad roll. So I want them cooled off. Then once they're cooled, so these ones still have tails on them. And they're kind of, they say large, and then it's funny when you put them in your hand, like they're just not extra large, which is fine. So once they're cooled off, you can take the tails off. And then to take the tails off, you just kind of pinch on the sides, and then the tail comes right off. So pinching here, and then the tail just slips right out of there. And don't leave your prawns or any cooled item, I think eggs might be the exception, in your shocking liquid, your ice bath very long. Don't leave things in the ice bath for very long, because it tends to do this thing to where it kind of, like we call it, gets waterlogged, and it's kind of soaking in and absorbing the water that it's in. So if you were to cook prawns and do all your mise en place the day before, cook your prawns if they're not already cooked, but ice bath them and then get them out of the water, so that if they sit overnight or even just for a couple hours, it doesn't kind of like dilute the flavor of your prawns or vegetables, whatever it is that you're trying to shock. Like I said, it kind of just takes on some of that water and then like dilutes out the flavor of whatever you're cooking there. Not a really great aspect in your food. So shocking is only meant to just leave it in there until that is cooled properly. So now that I have cooled prawns, cooked, tails are gone, I want to cut these in half. So most of your prawns have already been deveined here, so they kind of have like a starting point on where to cut. So with that same method of putting my board to the edge of my counter, putting my prawn to the edge of the board, I'm just gonna cut it in half, but follow through kind of where it started to be deveined and cut in half. So I have 2 prawn halves. And just being careful that you're up kind of on your fingertips, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But they're not, getting your fingers aren't kind of hanging out here, but everything's kind of up and you're out of the path of that knife that it's going to take, so you're not cutting yourself. Okay, now we're down to our rice paper, rice noodles, our rice products. So my rice noodles, I just have one of these little packages. This is a 1.76 ounce package. It's just a little package. It's a little package amongst a whole big package that I just get at the Asian grocery store that I love to wander if I ever have the chance. But it's just a small little package. It's 50 grams or 1.76 ounces. This is going to give me quite a bit of salad rolls, so if you find something bigger than this, you might want to consider separating it, because these can have a pretty decent shelf life, but once they're rehydrated, you got the time's ticking on when to use them. So like I said, if you have a bigger package and you're not doing as many, I would consider breaking your package apart and not using it all. And they're really easy to rehydrate, so if you maybe second guess, you're like, oh no, I ran out and I need to do more, it's really easy to rehydrate them, so don't worry. But it's better to just not waste a ton if you don't have to. So with this one here, we want to rehydrate it, and they're noodles. They're little rice noodles, or glass noodles, some people call them. They're just white, they're kind of see-through. They're going to get even more see-through once we rehydrate them. So to rehydrate them, I just want to have some really hot liquid to be rehydrating them. I'm not going to boil them like pasta. Definitely not a method like pasta. Just to rehydrate them. So I have another small pot. Actually, that I washed it. It's the same small pot. And it's just enough water for this to simmer in, or it's not simmer, sorry, to kind of steep in to rehydrate. I'll move it around just to make sure it's going to get submerged. And my tap water that I get out of my sink is crazy hot. So I could probably just run this with like my tap water, but I have it on a burner because I really want to make sure that this is getting hydrated like it should. But I feel like moving this around a little bit helps me get a little easier on it. But it's, like I said, it's like a glass noodle. There's not a lot to see here because it's just water. I don't even have salt in here. No salt. It's just hot water. It's steaming. Steaming is a good sign. So like I said, I've turned the gas off. There's no heat here. It's steaming. I saw a few little bubbles come up from the bottom of the pan, and then I added these noodles and I turned it off because these are just going to steep in here 5 to 10 minutes maybe. You can always check to see if they're rehydrated by tasting them, right? So you can always taste them just to double check, but they don't take a ton of time. It could be dependent on the temperature of your water. So maybe if your water is not hot enough, it's going to take a little bit more time. If your water is really hot, or maybe it came to a boil and then you added it right away and turned it off, it's probably going to be very, very quick. But you don't want them to boil. They will kind of like disintegrate and be really hard to work with. So once they have rehydrated and they're becoming very easy to pick up now, it's probably a good time to try them. I'm going to drain them or strain them, get all the water off. And then I also have on my list here, I need 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. So that's where the teaspoon of sesame oil comes in. So I'm going to strain these and then add my sesame oil to keep the noodles from sticking together. Take a little sample here, see what they're like. There's a little bit of chew left on it. A little crunch, not crunch, but just a little chewy still. I'm gonna let them sit in there for a little bit longer. I still see steam coming up off the pot. I'll just let them hang out for a little bit longer. All right, so noodles been strained. I added some sesame oil to it. You can definitely smell the sesame oil because the noodles are still a little warm. But just kind of mixing them around, make sure they get coated in that sesame oil so they don't stick together, because they will stick together. this rice paper and the rice noodles, you want to be careful with getting them stuck together when they're hot or like rehydrated. So moving on to my rice paper. I have all of my mise en place done. I'll get to all my blanks here in my recipe in a second because I've kind of just cruised right on through here. So getting my salad rolls to assemble and working with my rice paper, my rounds of rice paper. Let's see here. Oh, there we go. Here's one that's kind of broken. So you want to be really careful with working with your rice paper because they should be in like nice big lovely sheets like this, but they're really delicate. This is just dried rice paper. We're going to rehydrate them similar to what we did with our noodles here. But if you were to fold it, it breaks. It doesn't have a ton of give. They just kind of shatter. So if you drop your package of rice paper or whatever, it's going to just generally shatter and not be super fun to work with. So be careful with folding them, bending them, dropping them. You also want to be careful that your hands, when you're touching a dry piece, your hands aren't wet. So if my hands are wet while I'm touching a dry piece, my hands are going to stick to it and it's going to immediately start to rehydrate, and it's not going to be very fun to work with. And then as I said, once you get it hydrated, that it's not touching another one, or you're not stacking them together, or you're not trying to hydrate multiple at a time. When you rehydrate them, they should be kind of one at a time. So how that looks is that I have some hot water. Again, my tap water comes out really, really hot. And I have this large, shallow pan so that when I put this in here, it can totally be submerged and it's not sticking up the sides. So this is really great because it's flat, shallow. It can fit all of it at once. I did put a little bit of heat on it when it came on, but I turned it off because it's easier for me to use my fingers and try to flip this and pick this out than it is for tongs. Tongs tend to tear your paper. So once you get it in there, submerge it completely. If you were to let it kind of stick, it just wants to roll. So just submerge it completely right away. Hopefully I'll show you the next one how it doesn't work very well. And then I don't know, again, hot and warm, I guess, really warm, but warm enough for your fingers to kind of stand it. You can kind of be checking it to see how tender it is, and it won't take super, super long. And once you get a system going, like once I take this one out and to work on it, I'm going to put a new one in here so that while I'm building my other one, this one is rehydrating and it'll just kind of like an assembly line. But here we go. You can definitely see the difference that's happened. It's a little clear, and then now, look at that, it's all softened. So let me get this one on my cutting board and then show you what I'm talking about. If I have something to where I just kind of lay it on top. This one's not being a very good example. There it goes. It's starting to curl on this side. So you can see how it curls, and that's just going to be not very fun. So make sure that when you get it in, you submerge it completely. I might flip this one over and kind of force it to behave. So like I said, just make sure it's submerged completely. Don't let it just float on the top. If you're letting it float on the top, it's like I said, it's going to curl. It's going to be not very fun for you. So that rice paper is here. I swear it is. It's easier to work with, I found, with just like a kitchen towel or a linen. Like if you have like linen napkins, it's really nice to work on a linen napkin. They tend to either stick on a cutting board, like if they're just directly touching the cutting board, or slide around. It's like one or the other. It's not very fun. So I like to put them on just a damp. I just use water to dampen this towel, and then it just kind of helps keep it in place and doesn't slide around. I don't have a pool of water because I go from that pot to here, and I don't have a pool of water. So it's just a little easier to work with a damp towel. Not a dry towel, nothing soaking wet, but something damp. If it's dry, this paper is going to stick to it, and that's not going to be fun. If you notice that your paper has stuck to itself, dunk it back into your water, or like I'm putting my fingers into that pot of water and trying to just dab some water here because it's starting to get a little sticky. So dunk it in the water, or just kind of get a pool of water and it'll come off of itself there. All right, so with assembly can kind of be a few different things, kind of however you like it. I have my plate of mise en place here, and I have my noodles, my cilantro, I have my prawns. So what I like to do is start with 2 prawns, and I'll put them on there, And then what I'll do with my cilantro leaves is kind of place them between the prawns so that when I'm finished, in a perfect world, I have a pretty pattern that I'll be able to see here. So then I'll start with go with my romaine, because as I mentioned, my romaine is kind of be that backbone and kind of help hold everything together, and it kind of acts as like a little bit of a cup. So it'll hold all my stuff together. And then at this point, you can kind of go in whatever order you want to. Noodles, vegetables, whatever you're thinking. You can easily change up your vegetables, add vegetables. You know, avocado would be really great in this. All different kinds of vegetables would be really good in this, so you don't think that you have to stick to just these. And then remember that we're wanting to make this easy to eat. So with your first couple, maybe kind of ease off on some of your ingredients just to make rolling them easy. See kind of where that limit is so that they're not getting overly stuffed and it's not really difficult to eat. So I'm just kind of stacking them, trying to concentrate them into this little romaine cup because it just kind of helps control things. Plus I feel like it's nice, I have this nice contrast between the pattern I'm trying to make on the bottom with my prawns and that cilantro. And then from here, just gonna fold kind of like a burrito. And then once this paper is rolled and is touching itself, it's sticking to itself. So when you're rolling and folding it, try to be purposeful with how you're rolling, because like I said, once this paper touches itself, the rice paper, it's a little difficult to take off of itself. So that one worked pretty well. I can see 2 prawns, I can see this really pretty cilantro leaf. It's a little loose for my taste. The next one could probably be a little tighter rolled. And then that can go on a plate. So let me grab my next one that's been hydrating in that water. And then try to flatten it as soon as you can while it's still a little wet. And then what I'll do is I'll put a new one in that water so it's hydrating in that water while I'm doing this one. This romaine seems to be a little obtuse. I'm not really liking it, so I'm going to shorten it just a tad, just to make that a little easier. Let's get some noodle. I've seen a lot of people dress the noodles with the peanut sauce. That's a good option too. You could use the peanut sauce inside the roll and dress your noodles with some kind of sauce. That would be a-okay. Once you get all your mise en place together, it's really up to you how you want to get it structured. And then just be careful when you're rolling that you're not pulling too much and stretching to tear it. This one's a little tighter. But like I said, that romaine really helps hold things together so that when you have this, it's not just kind of like this limp thing that has no structure. It really helps kind of hold it together so you have something that has some structure to it and it's a little easier to eat. Go for number 3 here. Get my 4th one in the water. Prawns first. So it's this nice balance of trying to pull these salad rolls kind of tight so they're not super loose, but then also not trying to tear them because they're very delicate. All right, last roll here, paper coming out of the water. So you could certainly do these because it does take a lot of assembly work. So if you're doing quite a few, trying to feed a lot of people, you could make these ahead of time or even just do your mise en place ahead of time. That would work. But if you're going to roll them ahead of time, I would suggest when you refrigerate them, that you put some sort of wet towel or wet linen over them to store them, because these rolls will tend to dry out, like the paper on the outside, your rice paper that you've rolled them in, will kind of dry out and become a little chewy, not very pleasant to be chewing on. The other thing to be very cautious of is as you're storing them, if you were to store them, like if I was going to store these for a long period of time, I might use some of that sesame oil to oil my plate, and then I might use some oil to oil the sides of them. So if they were to touch their neighbor, I could peel them apart quickly. Because again, if this touches itself, it wants to stick to it, so it's going to stick to its neighbor. So you can kind of see how these are sticking, but as those sit next to each other for a long period of time, they're going to rip and tear, and then now all your work is going to be kind of out the window there. So building them to eat immediately and dip into some sauce is really ideal. But if you were to make them ahead of time, there's a couple options there. But like I said, try to be careful of letting them stick to each other. If you've rolled them nice and tight, you might be able to kind of have a little bit of a display where you've cut them. See how pretty all that color is there. And then you could have your nice dipping sauce here for peanut sauce. So that's your finished product for peanut sauce, or for your salad rolls, and then how we assemble them. So let's go back and take a look at our blanks here, because like I said, I kind of just cruised through that. Okie doke. So we went over our peanut sauce, that our blank there was smooth, that we're just mixing everything so smooth. All right, so then now with our salad rolls down below for the salad rolls portion here. So it says to poach the prawns, use a small pot filled with salt water and bring to a boil. So your two blanks there at the bottom of the page. Our small pot filled with salt water, bring to a boil. Once the water is simmering, place prawns in water and poach till done, about 3 to 4 minutes. Once the prawns are done, remove from simmering water and place immediately in an ice bath to cool. When the prawns are cooled, remove from ice water and dry. Remove the tails and cut in half. So your first blank on the second page is tails. To rehydrate the rice noodles, let them sit in hot water. This water needs to be just under a boil. If your tap water is really hot, you can just use that. Otherwise, get a small pot of water on the stove and set hot, so you want to let it sit in the hot water till soft. So let it sit till soft, about 10 minutes. Once soft, drain and coat with the sesame oil and set aside. So that second paragraph on the second page, you have soft and sesame oil. And then the last paragraph here is that when all the vegetables are prepped, rehydrate the rice paper one at a time in the hot water till soft in a large shallow pan, just a few minutes. Once the paper is soft, remove from the water and dry on a damp towel. Damp is your first blank on that last paragraph. To build the salad roll, start with the prawns and cilantro. Place 2 half prawns in the center of the rice paper side by side but not touching, and the cilantro between the prawns. Then put the romaine on top of the prawns and follow with the rest of the vegetables and the rice noodles. Roll tight, be careful not to tear the rice paper. So your last 2 blanks are romaine, so then you're going to put the romaine on top of the prawns. And then you're going to be careful not to tear. So remembering we don't want to tear the rice paper by pulling on it too hard, being a little too aggressive with it, kind of pulling it apart or rolling it too tightly. Once it has torn, you can definitely try to make a salad roll out of it, just to kind of see how difficult it is. But sometimes if you know, these little packages of rice paper, I think, are 32 or so in a package. So you usually have 1 or 2 to kind of waste if you needed to. I don't know if it'd be worth the efforts to kind of deal with a torn rice paper. It's just really challenging. So keep that in mind. Then, like I said, if you're storing them, make sure you get some sort of oil around them so they're not going to stick to each other. But that is salad rolls and peanut sauce.